Hello and welcome to Digging with Durgan. Today we are going to be starting a particularly lengthy story as a prelude to our tales on the Greeks, many different Greek city-states and civilizations and so on and so forth. But this is the Iliad. Now this is going to be a long fucking story. The book itself, an audiobook, is like 14 hours long. I hope this won't be 14 hours long, but it'll probably be pretty long. If you haven't noticed by my my First Dynasty Egypt playlist, I went into 10 different episodes on a dynasty most people cover in 5 minutes. So we will be going into loving detail. That said, we should begin. Our story opens outside of a city they call Thebes. It's likely modern-day Thebes. And we start with Achilles and Agamemnon are bickering over spoils. Before them, innumerous corpses lay on the ground, and the men have just distributed the loot. And here's where we start off. And so, as Achilles and Agamemnon argue, an old man covered in good robes and gold and all sorts of things approaches and falls to his knees before Agamemnon, begging and pleading for his daughter back, offering innumerable spoils in exchange. Agamemnon laughs in his face and spits on the ground, insulting him and telling him that if he does not leave his camp immediately, then he will be struck down, that he will rape his daughter, and that she will make looms for him in his home, and that there is nothing that he can do about it. He leaves disheartened and afraid, and goes off into the woods to pray out of spite. He says to the god Apollo that I have made innumerable offerings to you. I have burned flesh and bone. I have offered gold and trinkets. Please avenge me. The god Apollo, knowing this old man for a long time, is enraged by the injustice laid upon him by Agamemnon, and he struts forth in the skies, letting loose a rain of arrows down upon Agamemnon's troops. Disease and arrows kill innumerable men, until one of the priests within the camp interpret the message of the god Apollo that the only way that this will stop is if the girl is released without ransom. At first, Agamemnon seems reasonable. He does not want to spite the god Apollo, but he finds a technicality to reimburse himself. He says since he cannot take ransom, he will take his reimbursement from the spoils of war. He will take it from the men who serve him. Achilles is disgusted by this. He says that we've already given up all the spoils to the men. Are we going to go to them and take back what is rightfully theirs? And he laughs, and he says that if his men will not give him their spoils, then he will steal the prize of another man. Now, prizes were commonly gold or slaves, but in this instance, he's referring to a very prestigious slave girl, which most of the high-ranking officers received. It's like one of their only payments. And he wants to take that from them to reimburse himself out of technicality without spiting the gods. Of course, Achilles is fucking pissed. And they start arguing with each other some more. And Achilles calls Agamemnon the commander of trash, a man whose liver is too soft to strap on armor, a man who leads from the center of the army instead of the front, who is too cowardly to do battle because he would risk his own death. And, of course, Agamemnon doesn't take kindly to this. And this is where we get a sort of freeze frame, where a god steps onto the scene and speaks to Achilles. This would be Athena, speaking supposedly on behalf of Hera. And as Achilles begins to unsheath his sword to strike down Agamemnon, the goddess stays his hand and says that he may spite him with words, but not to strike him down here. And of course, Achilles, now wanting to anger the gods, agrees. Time proceeds, and they go back to arguing. Achilles puts his sword back in his sheath, and as he does so, another man named Hector bursts forth, insulted by the actions of Agamemnon, another client king under Agamemnon, like Achilles. And he shouts at him, arguing with him. Agamemnon insults him, and he pulls out a staff covered in gold and made of wood. He says, "This staff cannot prosper, for it is stripped of bark and dead in my hand." He mentions that it's a sacred staff that men traded to say who could speak first. He swears upon the staff that the day will come when you need Achilles again, and on that day you will be incapable of defeating me. You will eat your own heart out for your own foolishness, for your own stupidity in your insulting of your men out of your own arrogance. And he sits on the ground and crosses his arms and legs and shuts his eyes. And as Agamemnon begins to speak, another man in the audience cuts in, and he says that this is foolishness. This man is a very, very, very old man, and he's from the generation before. He says that in my day, generals and men were strong of arm and wise of brain. That the men of his day were more courageous and intelligent than any of them, and that there shall never be another man such as they. And yet, even they obeyed his advice. And he advises that Agamemnon give up the girl, and that Achilles does not disobey his king. Of course, at first it looks like this is going to prevail, but Agamemnon's arrogant again, and Achilles goes back to being a dingleberry and insults Agamemnon, saying that if he takes his ship, he shall spear him through, and that his blood shall run red upon his sword. He stomps off towards his ship. Agamemnon sends some men. They go to take Achilles' prize. Achilles willingly gives it up because he does not want to kill the men that Agamemnon has sent, because it's not their fault. And then a goddess who is portrayed as Achilles' mother slithers aboard the ship and hears him weeping about how Agamemnon stole his prize, and about how all the work of the last days has been for naught, that he has been robbed. And his mother, / goddess, promises that he will be reimbursed in the days to come. And so that is a good covering of the beginning of the Iliad. I hope you've enjoyed.